Are here. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. Today, we've been fortunate to be joined by Nava Israel. She's an international best-selling author, and she's here to talk about a recently released book, Controlled, how we have lost our freedom and how we can reclaim it. She's also going to share a bit about herself, maybe a bit about her background, and I hope you guys enjoy. And without further ado, I hand it over to you, Nava. Thank you so much. Tell us about yourself. What is it that you love to do?
Mhm. Thank you so much, Mufaro. Thank you for having me here, and hello to everyone who listens. So what do I do and what do I enjoy? Um, I am now nearing my sixth decade. So I have done a lot throughout my life, but I still have many plans to do many more things. So I've done in my life, I raised a family. I used to be a clinical dietitian working with elite athletes for many years. I did my PhD in epidemiology, no connection to COVID whatsoever. This is focusing on statistics of behaviors, and and then immigrated with my family to Canada 23 years ago and shifted my practice to something different that also is my passion, and that is social change and social justice. And what I've been doing for many years is helping immigrants like myself who are immigrating to Canada to build this as their home. So to integrate in their professions, to understand the logic of this country, the culture, so that eventually we grow to feel that this is home. And also working with systems on the other side who are licensing immigrant professionals, who are hiring immigrants, who are integrating them into different systems to make it in an equitable way, in a way that is fair, that is just. So that's what I've been doing for many years. And then about 5 years ago, I've handed it over to other people who are already doing it. And I went into writing my book because that's when everything, all the thousand pieces that I've collected throughout my life,
Mm.
suddenly fell into place into this one model that explains everything, which was mind-boggling to me. And once I saw this pattern, and I've always been looking for patterns, that's why I did my PhD in epidemiology, because it's all about finding the patterns that can
Mm.
predict something and that we can then do something about it.
Oh, thank you.
And so this model that I've developed, it explains so much in our lives that I just couldn't do anything else. I left everything, and for 5 years I was just writing it. And so
Oh,
recently I published, here's my
yes.
baby. Here's what it looks like. And I just actually won 2 literary awards for
Uh,
it.
no, congratulations. Really, congratulations on that. I know writing a book is a very intensive process, and you're putting out a lot of personal experience and study into it. And so I actually wanted to bring it back maybe to two central points before we move on to the book itself. Um, Basically, um, what is studying human behavior? Because I get judging from what I saw doing my research about you, you were trying to figure out the deep mechanisms of why we do things, the mind and its behavioral patterns, why we create certain containers of behavior to function as a society. So I guess the first question I'd like to ask is, what has the study of human behavior led you to understand about yourself? And also, how did this seeking of knowledge inspire writing your book that you released recently?
Thank you. What has it taught me about myself? Wow, that's a great question. I think that it sort of went hand in hand with knowing myself, my own life experience, and seeing how it translates into this model.
Hmm.
And then seeing this model and looking back at my life and suddenly making sense of things. So it went almost both ways. One of the reasons that I've been looking for this pattern, for this model, not even knowing that I was looking for it, but like the salmon that swims upstream knowing it's going somewhere but not sure where. That's how my book came about. I was always puzzled on a personal level and on a societal level. How come the most intelligent species on Earth, presumably us, can come up with such brilliant solutions to everything, brilliant inventions, progress, and yet be constantly going worse and worse on the scale of how harmful we are to one another, how harmful we are to our planet, to the point where now we are at this point where so many people are saying, is this our last generation, right? So it made no sense to me. How come smart people do stupid things? and it is on every scale of our life, right, Mufara? I'm sure you experienced it as well. Like you would sometimes meet a person that seems so rational and so logical and so intelligent, or not, doesn't matter. Doesn't have to be highly educated to be intelligent, and yet doing things that are destructive and harmful, making foolish decisions, repeating the same mistakes over and over, right? And so it's that kind of behavior, both personal, societal, global, that blew my mind. And I was like, I have to understand why this is happening. And how it affected me as well. About 5 years ago, it's like this pivotal time for me. Or some years ago, memory opened up in me, a memory of a childhood trauma that I was withholding, I guess, from myself because it was too terrible for me to want to remember. And that shed light on all kinds of things of my life, of my early childhood, of my nearest environment. And all these understandings came out of how I was myself blind or not aware. Sorry, I don't want to use ableist terms. How I was unaware completely of dynamics within my own life. How I was the victim of different things that I haven't seen myself as. I thought that's normal life. That's what everyone is doing. That's what happens to everyone, right? And so suddenly, how sometimes you have this 1,000-piece puzzle on your table, right? Like all these 1,000 pieces, and it's just a big mess, and you're like, well, whatever. And then you start putting them together, and you're like, oh my God, there's a pattern here. There's a picture here. And not only that, this picture is not only my life's picture. It is your life. It is their life. It's our collective life. It's our global life. Look back at history. We've been doing it over and over. So that's how it came to be.
Wow. It is interesting how pivotal and how divine timing works when we realize certain things about ourselves, and basically how they've summed up to most of our actions and a lot of the outcomes that we've had to, or not had to, but that we've received in our lives for that matter. So I was going to ask, because this is an interesting one. It resonates, this topic, deeply with me because you mentioned, we have whole different systems that kind of entrap us in every single sphere of our life. It can be, as you mentioned, in your field of work, in your religious community. You mentioned religion as another one of them. In your social community, your friendship dynamics, your friendship circles, in your family, even family entrapments are another thing. And then I guess now we're seeing within the world racial tensions, geopolitical tensions, all these entrapments. I've always asked myself the question, and I'll probably extend this to you. There's so many instances where dogmatic systems and beliefs, they've worked for people. We know people that thrive in their systems because they're comfortable there. So there's no need to disrupt that peace. But the exact same tone, there are people that simply don't resonate with certain ways of living, and those people become the outcasts. Those people become the people that really struggle. I mean, I know that in certain areas where you mentioned there's a strong patriarchal community where men have an overriding authority. Some people, and I can't speak for everyone, but I have seen there's some people, particularly women, that actually enjoy that community. They thrive in it. And then there's some women that simply can't stand it. They feel it's oppressive. So I was going to ask you, where's the middle ground? Because I think people can't live without a system. I don't know if that makes sense, because it's very radical to think that, okay, if there's no systems, then it'll be, just absolute chaos. People may be a bit disorderly. Who knows how people would behave without a system? But at the same time, their systems are so outdated or sometimes oppressive or very uncompromising, meaning they exclude people more than they should include people. So I don't know what your opinion and thoughts on that are.
Yeah, yeah. These are great points. It's so interesting. I think the key, the answer to your question starts with the assumption that there is only one system, right? So you're either in the system or you're outside of a system, and then there's no system, and then there's chaos. That is exactly the mindset that the cones are trying to instill in us. So just to clarify for those who haven't read my book, so a cone is that the shape of my model is a cone, and a cone represents a system that has mechanisms inside, very, very predictable mechanisms that are very oppressive, meaning they are hyper controlling. They don't let us think for ourselves. They distract us. They control us. They convince us. The worst thing that a cone is doing to us is not just that it exploits us and harms us and makes us harm others that are not in our cone, because they are the others, right? And therefore bad, dirty, harmful, whatever, right? Not us, not wonderful like us. One of the things that a cone is doing to us is that it becomes invisible to us. It becomes the normal. It becomes the life, the only possible way to live. So, and other ways, even if you do see other ways, you are taught that these are the bad ways. These are the things that the bad people are doing. These are the things that our enemies are doing, the stupid people are doing, right? The sinners, whatever cone you are in. And we are, each of us, in many different cones, right? And so when you gave the wonderful example of the women who live in pardon me, in patriarchal societies. And some of them seem to thrive there and be happy with it and support their patriarchs, even though clearly these patriarchs oppress them and are unfair to them. And then there are those women who say, no, I don't want that. This is not fair. I want a better life. I want a voice. I want my own agency. But then where would they go, right? And so here's the story. The story is like that. A patriarchy, which is a cone, it is a conceptual cone that people inherit from generation to generation and never question it, right? This is the normal, even though it isn't. It is the normal. Men are raised that they are superior to women naturally. They don't have to prove it. They are raised to know that they have greater options in life, that their voice is what matters, and that women are there to support and serve, and many patriarchal societies that are intertwined with religions as well also say that women are the natural sinners, that everything bad that happens is because of a woman or whatever, right? Women are the scapegoats.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a woman grow up in such an environment? A woman has three options. Okay, one option is to remain obedient and silent because that is the safest way. Now, Stockholm syndrome is that syndrome of captives and prisoners who learn to adore their captor. The terrorist who caught them, they become their greatest supporter. It's that weird thing that happens in our head where we just need to survive. And so one of the ways to survive is to support the one who might harm us, right? And if we are cute and serving and yes and thank you, then we are safe, right? And we grow to believe that this is our role in life and this is the best way, and that this harmful person is our savior, right? And we don't see the harms that they make. So that is one option for a woman or anyone in a cone, not just women. The second option is to side with the oppressor, meaning becoming their closest ally and try to be as much like them as possible because that gives you the power. So women in patriarchal environments behave like men with other women because that's what gives them power, right? So they oppress other women, they become harsh, controlling, they support the man who controls them, right? And so it seems like they have it good.
Sorry,
really,
Nava. Is it possible just for 1 second? My dad is locked outside the house for a second. I just need 1 minute. I can hear him knocking. I just need to pause. I will give you 1 minute. Sorry, I'll be back.
Let your dad in.
We're good to go. Apologies for
that. No worries.
Yes, but you can go ahead. So you were on the second variation.
Yes.
Those are side with the oppressor.
Yes. So the third kind, the third way that a woman has in these cones is becoming the rebel, right? Is saying, I won't have it. I don't want you to tell me what to do. I have a voice, I have an opinion, right? And like in every cone, because patriarchy is just one example, but in every other structure, take an oppressive family or a religion, an extreme religious faction, or anyone who wants you to be obedient and do what you are told, and suddenly you don't, and you have difficult questions for them, then you become the traitor, right? You become the internal traitor. You become the heretic, the traitor, the sinner, again, depending on the cone, right? Or the unruly woman who will never marry because what man will marry a woman that has such a big mouth, or all of these things. And so these women, the rebel women, they also have options. One option is just to suck it up and say, that's my life, there's no other way. And then there's the other way that is more risky, but also has more promise, and that's leaving, right? Leaving that society, leaving that cone, and looking for something better. And the problem is that our cones, as I said earlier, one of the tools that they have of control is convincing us that there's nothing else out there, that this is the only way. And if you leave, you are in chaos. You will be eaten. You will, whatever it is that you're doing, you will be isolated. You will be miserable. You're better off with us, right? But these are lies. These are lies to keep us inside, right? Think about the cult. That is exactly a cone. A cult is a cone where everyone in the cult are said, everything outside of our cult, everyone are sinners. The devil is coming after them. They will die alone, or whatever stories they tell their members to make their members believe that there is nothing outside of that cult, outside of that cone, because that's why people stay, right?
Interesting. It's a tough one, because there's I completely understand where you're coming from in terms of how we can become a bit ignorant to any other possible answers outside of what we want to believe. And I think that's just a human tendency because we're scared of the unknown inherently. And that's always a good means of control for many organized groups, religions, cults, whatever factions, military factions. People take advantage of that. And also, I guess, the difficulty of circumstances, people who are just born into situations where they have been not exposed to anything outside of their social norms. But there's also the same token where, how do people function without boundaries? How do people conduct themselves? How do they regulate their behaviors? And a lot of revolutionary thinkers have kind of portrayed this as, yes, they've been freedom seeking in their thinking, but the end result in which their lives have kind of come out, things have been disorderly or something's gone wrong. It just makes it less appealing to someone who's maybe trying to think independently that they'll succeed. So maybe perhaps if there are more successful examples of people that maybe broke cultural ties or, religious ties, and they managed to make a success out of themselves, they managed to overcome the persecution and everything like that. If there are more examples of that, then maybe I'm assuming your cone model of thought would really become more of a social tool, if I can use that word, a social tool for people who want to cultivate themselves. So actually, I was going to ask, how would you, two questions, how does someone apply the cone model to their own lives, especially considering the implications of something like that? People who grow up in a very, very strict upbringing where there's certain rules and regulations and, there's no compromises there. How does someone safely apply that to themselves, obviously? And secondly, how have you applied it to your own life? And can you maybe just attest to how it's helped you overcome some of the issues that you've had to face in your own life?
Okay, thank you. So actually, I'm hearing 3 questions. So I will start with the first one. And if I forget the other 2, because my ADHD, you will remind me.
I have ADHD too, so don't worry. My attention span is also quite terrible.
Okay, so I will start actually with the first question, though you didn't ask it as a question, but you made it a statement, but I really want to address it. And that is the fact that all we see are these cones, right? All we see, basically, we don't see alternatives, successful alternatives. We don't see them. And the reason we don't see them is intentional. It is not accidental, and it is not because they don't exist. Oh, they exist, and they have existed throughout history. But the cones in our lives, even historically, not just today, made sure to leave them out of our history books. I'll give you an example. There is the belief among historians and politicians and policymakers and everyone that when you have more than 100, 120 people, roughly, there has to be some hierarchy there. Otherwise, the group falls apart. It's like it's a principle in sociology. right? And we
Yep.
take it for granted that there has to be hierarchy, otherwise it's chaos. But if you look into certain societies around the world, for example, indigenous society in North America, and I know a lot of also a lot of tribes in Africa as well, tribes in indigenous people in Australia, and historically in Europe as well, and Eastern Europe. Although, again, as I said, they didn't get into the history books. Lived in a way that is completely communal, where the hierarchy was not a top-down pyramid. It was communal in the sense that everyone helped everyone. If it's the Ubuntu, concept of I acknowledge you as a human, and you acknowledge my humanity, and together we make a better life for everyone. And in many, many societies, there have not been one chief that told everyone what to do. And if there was a chief, it could be either a man or a woman. And the role of the chief was to be of service to everyone, making sure that everyone is doing well versus becoming powerful and telling people what to do. So these societies existed everywhere, and some of them still exist. It's just they are not making the news. They are not making the history books, and they are not making the news. I'll give you an example. There is in Eastern Europe, archaeological excavations found many, many, many mega cities that were built in a circle. Okay, they were built in a circle with an empty space inside. And these mega cities had many, many small structures, each with their own garden, and no structures for central government, no military, no, jails, no nothing. People just lived together, and they used the central space for marketplaces, for celebrations, and everything. And these societies existed for over 8 centuries, which is twice as long as the Roman Empire, right?
Incredible.
Did they make it into our history books? No, they did not. Because our societies don't want us to know these things. They don't want us to realize that there are better ways of living together, that what we know now is the sick version, is the exploitive version. It is the version that gives a few people a lot of power and means on the backs of all the rest of us, right? And our planet.
Completely.
So that's my answer to your first question, which is, it's not true that if we get out of our current systems, all there is out there is chaos. That is a lie. All that's out there can be, if you don't know what to do, and if you can't find your people and to do it right, but there are wonderful ways of doing it, right? The second question, I think, was, how do we get out of this? Am I right?
Yes,
Am I remembering?
Yes, 100%. 100%.
Okay. And the answer is different depending on which cone you want to rescue yourself from. So I'll give you a simple example, not big systems, personal systems. Let's say that you are a child in an abusive family, or your partner is abusive, an abusive narcissist. And what are your options? Right? So when you're a child, it is very difficult to leave a family and just, will you live on the streets? So then, the option is, are there relatives who would be willing to take you? Usually what happens with abusive families is that only people within the family know it's abusive. People outside the family think that everything is nice, because usually, many times, not all the time, but many abusive parents, especially the narcissistic ones, they create a perfect picture on the outside. And only the people inside know that this is a sick system. So, what can a child do, right? Really, not much. What a child can do is once they realize that this is the situation, if they can find an ally outside of the family who will keep strengthening their soul and keep reminding them that they are worthy, that they are loved, that they are lovable, not just loved, that it is possible to love them. And the reason that they feel that their parents don't love them is the parents' problem, not because they are flawed. If there is someone who can help that child and just carry them through those years until the child can get up and leave safely, that would be a solution, right? And a few of us are lucky to have that support, and many don't, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
And
yeah.
only when we grow up, if we are lucky, we realize that it's them, not us, right? Many of us are raised to believe that we are the problem. We are, right? We are the troublemakers. We are the traitors, the sinners, whatever it is. And then we are locked inside that cone that was put on us and we can't get out. But then let's take the partner of an abusive partner. Yeah. So you're married or not married, doesn't matter. You have a partner who is abusive. And then there are two things. One is your life in danger? Because unfortunately, many forms of abuse are physical abuse, and let's say usually it's the women who are abused, although not necessarily. But I would say that the majority of abusive relationships, the women are the ones abused. And then what are her options? Because we also know that the woman that leaves a violent abuser gets killed, right? Sadly, tragically. So that's why there are shelters where a woman can hide. And that's just a sign of a sick society where the victim is the one who has to hide, right? Um,
I hear you.
yeah. But if it is not a physically abusive relationship, but an emotionally abusive, which is no better, but at least it's not a risk to the woman's life, then the only thing she can do is get up and walk away. Because there is no negotiating with a cone. There is no negotiating with a person who benefits from the power, right? And so again, depending on the case, she will have to find support systems outside, because many times these abusive partners, they keep all the money, right? They don't allow the woman to work, so they make sure they control her financially, right? So if the woman can start studying or acquiring a profession and becoming somehow financially more independent, she will be able to walk out, right? So there are different ways depending on the case. But the one thing that we need to remember is that there is no rehabilitating a cone. It's once you have someone who is abusive and exploitive, the chances of them to find God, as it were, to suddenly find that generosity and change are close to zero.
Okay. Um, it's interesting. So I guess that will lead me to the question is how do we live conducively with people who need their cones, right?
Sorry, can you say that again?
How do you live conducively or peacefully with someone who wants their cone? Because it works both ways. It's if someone benefits from being in a cone, you can't be an oppressor to try to liberate them from a cone, if that makes sense. You can't tell someone how and to live and how not to live based on what's worked for you and what's not. It's also not fair. So what way do you believe you meet someone halfway? If someone has a strict belief system and they won't change it because it's detrimental to their well-being, how would you find the middle ground between you and that person?
Yeah. Wow, a wonderful question. You know, it will be up to you to
Mm,
decide whether you want this person in your life or not. Because I'll give you an example. Yeah. Let's say that you are of the LGBTQ community,
mm,
you're gay, okay?
mm,
And your friends that you grew up with, and
mm,
they were your community or your community
mm,
that in other ways you love and you appreciate, but they are very conservative in their views. And for them, you are a horrible sinner.
mm,
Okay. What do you do? Right? How do you
mm.
continue being in a relationship with them
Yeah.
when this is the case, right? And this is just a theoretical case, and it can be 1,000 other cases. You
Mm.
know, they can be right wing and you are left wing, and you know,
No, but
you don't
yeah.
you have different views. They are religious, you're not. Whatever the difference is, then you are at the crossroad because, and it is up to you to decide what you are willing to tolerate
Mm,
and what you are willing to do to remain in contact and in a relationship with these people, or what conditions they set for you for them to be in your life, right? And whether you are willing to meet these conditions. So let's go back to the example of the gay.
yeah.
So let's say that they will say, you know what, I don't want to hear it from you. You just have to hide it so that no one hears your shame, and we will be able to be a family and pretend that everything is okay. And then the question is, are you willing to do that?
Mm,
Maybe you feel that your family is all your whole life and this is a price you're willing to pay. I'm going to say no, but but this is an individual decision, right? And then you may decide to stay or walk away from them and figure out what will be the price of walking out on them, your own personal price, and how you're what is best for you. But whatever your decision is, stay or go, here is my warmest suggestion. And this is something that I write in my book. And these are the last two chapters that are very important.
mm.
Even if you walk, whether you stay or walk away, find a place in your heart for forgiveness.
Wow.
Because if you live with anger and vengeance and insult and unhealed trauma, you carry it with you, it eats you up, it harms you. And then, whatever you will keep finding as your next step in life, you will carry this negativity with you and you will build the next cone in line.
Mm,
That's why we keep repeating cones after cone after cone. And so, and I want to clarify, when I say healing and forgiveness, I don't mean excusing people or people's behavior. I don't mean that you have to start believing that if they say that being gay is a sinner and it's something dirty and forbidden, that forgiving them means agreeing with them.
mm,
That is not what I mean in forgiving. I mean forgiving in the deeper sense where you see them as human beings, as imperfect human beings who have their own trauma,
mm,
who have been brainwashed, right? Who have their own strong beliefs that they cannot get out of, and their own life injuries, and you see them as imperfect human beings. That's what it is, right? Because
mm,
we are all imperfect. And then once you see them as imperfect human beings who are, their beliefs are more about them than it is about you, you can more easily tolerate their behaviors by just forgiving their imperfections and just let it fly over your head, or leave them without the weight of guilt and anger and vengeance because you let it be. You let it go, right? That's the forgiveness I'm talking about. And that is the only way, honestly. Because as you said yourself, Mufaro, there is, in most cases, there's no talking to people who are still locked in cones. There's just no convincing them, right?
No. Wow. We've eaten a bit at a time, but it's definitely been a very, very, very insightful conversation into, I guess, a dilemma all of us face in our lives. Everyone has
Yes.
to go through it and figure out where they stand and how they want to conduct themselves. It's just a journey, which I think it's a challenge that life gives everyone. And how we cultivate it, what means and methods we developed to cope and to get things done is quite interesting. And I feel that the cone model, I've never heard of dogmatic patterns being I guess compared to a cone. So this is the first time that whole concept has
It
really
is a new
been.
model.
It is
It
it
is a
is
new model that I've developed. That's why.
it is a new, and I guess it's going to be very necessary now, particularly the way things are today. It's quite difficult, not for most people, not everyone, but for most people. I think the cone model can really be of benefit to them, helping them navigate and make choices that are beneficial to them and ultimately will help them get through whatever difficulty they're facing. So thank you so much for sharing it and for being honest too, for being honest where you stand. I can tell
Thank you,
that.
Mufar. Can I say one last thing? I know our time's
No,
almost up,
no,
but
go
I
ahead.
do want to tell your audience and you, apart from, if you want to buy the book, that's fine. But it's also an ebook, and soon it will be an audio book. So it's easy just to listen if you're not a big reader. But beyond that, if you go on my website, so if you can put my website address on your
Gotcha.
YouTube, if you go on my website, you can download for free a self-assessment that I developed, which are questions that you answer about yourself, and it will give you an idea or a measure of how vulnerable you are to manipulative people and systems, because it is this vulnerability that will make you a prisoner in cones, right?
Yeah.
So once you understand your vulnerabilities, you will be able to ask them the difficult questions, if that's what you want, of who is exploiting these vulnerabilities, who is telling me what to do because of that, right?
Mhm.
Who is making me do things that I wouldn't normally do because they know my buttons and they push it, right? So it's free. You can download it, it's a PDF, print it out for yourself and do your assessment and see where your vulnerabilities are.
You actually answered my next question. That was the follow-up question, was just how people can access the book. And also, I guess maybe you mentioned that they have the questionnaire, but I was going to ask, do you work with people in person if they do reach out to you, via email or
So
mainly? Yeah,
right now, I don't treat people. I'm not, so just to clarify, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a
no.
therapist, and I don't do personal counseling.
Mm,
But there are so many people out there that are. And if you understand, if you suspect that you are trapped in a cone, in a system that oppresses you, silences you, shames you, right, scares you, sets you against other people, these will be clues for you that you are trapped. And that is never good. And so you can use this questionnaire as a start. You can read this book. The online book is cheap, the ebook. Um, and but people can always connect with me over my website. There's a contact form. I will always answer. I'm not a snob. I don't have the capacity to treat
100%.
people. But
100%.
if people have questions or comments or anything, I'm happy to respond.
No, thank you. And I guess the last question is, what are your words of wisdom and advice for those tuning in today?
My words of advice, words of wisdom. Okay, now I will sound like in a beauty pageant. World peace. World peace is possible. It is not just an answer, a stupid answer on a beauty pageant. It really is possible. One of the things that all the cones in our world make us keep believing, they want us to live in fear. And they want us to live in hopelessness and believe that they are the only ones that can save us and keep us safe. This is a lie. So if there's one thing that I would leave your audience with, is this: don't believe the people who keep telling you that the world is hostile and that there's no other way but being hostile to one another. That is a lie. There are beautiful ways of being together. There are beautiful ways of living with our Mother Earth without harming her and without harming one another. And all we need to do is open our eyes and look for other communities who are already there, already doing it, and joining them or building your own. It's that belief that will save us.
Nava, thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure to talk to you, and it will also be good to keep in touch as your book
Absolutely. I would
expands its
love
reach.
that.
And I'm hoping that those that tuned in, this was definitely of some benefit to you, that maybe it will encourage you to do a bit of self-evaluation. You don't have to, again, this is not a prescription or any forced recommendation. It's always just a possible avenue for someone who's looking for different options in their life. So Nava, thank you so much. All the best with the book's continued release. I'll do my part to try promote it, and hopefully it'll garner more interest and, again, more success with the book. So yeah, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And
Thank you.
thank you so much for hosting me, and keep up with your podcast. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Truly appreciate it.
Take care.
Oh, wait.